Ready out. I have a mug.
Mary Richards, what does your mug say?
I love yoga.
Welcome back to our back care month at Experiential Anatomy. Joining me is the hilarious Mary Richards. Hi there.
Hi, Lizzie.
And I'm Lizzie Lasater. So today I want to ask you about Virabhadrasana 1, Warrior 1. What is going on with my hips in Warrior 1? Or what should be ideally going on? There's a lot of talk about squaring the hips, leveling the hips. Even in a wonderful yoga class I took in India, they used the word levelize. Levelize your hips.
Levelize.
So in your professional, expert, anatomical, yoga therapeutic opinion, what do you teach? What do you want to see in your students' hips in Warrior 1?
I want to see the natural, round integrity of the pelvis supported in the posture. So I don't want to shove a square peg in a round hole. And so the term squaring the hips, that tends to, I have a little recoil in response to that, because the thing is, if we're in Warrior 1, our legs are split.
Yeah.
We have one leg forward and one leg back. And the pelvis is a bony ring, and we need the pelvis to sit in the space between the legs. And that action of squaring and then levelizing the pelvis, it puts so much strain on the sacroiliac joints, the low back, and all of that translates up into the neck and the base of the skull. So what I want to see is, I want the natural intelligence of the pelvis to reign supreme, because I have a pelvis obsession.
Yes,
but,
tell us more.
But we can feel the difference. You know, we can feel the difference in Warrior 1 when we try to push that back hip forward and get it on the same plane as the front hip. We know that that is a path of woe, not a path of joy. And the pelvic floor is doing different things. So those ideas of levelizing and squaring are really not based on the anatomy, and as well as the enjoyment of the pose.
Yeah, remember that idea? That's what I love about your teaching, Mary, is that you really approach it from what does the body want to do, and then let's construct the asana or deconstruct the asana based on that. I had a funny experience last year. I was in Beijing assisting mom at a big restorative training, and we were in a nice hotel, but the coffee in the hotel was so awful. And I kept saying to myself, it's like somebody told a Chinese person what coffee tastes like, and then the Chinese person like reconstructed coffee out of twigs and berries, like having nothing to do with like coffee beans, because it tasted so awful. And I sort of think sometimes it almost feels like the cues that we inherit in an asana context are like as if somebody told you intellectually about how a body should work, but without having actual contact with the anatomical reality, which is one of your favorite terms, of what's going on when we have the lived embodied experience.
I really enjoy hearing that, Lizzie, because I know when I started out teaching 18 years ago, I used to make outlines that tracked a bell curve, and I would think about what it was I was going to say, and what were the most important cues that I had to memorize. And fortunately, I'm a bit of I'm somewhat non-compliant, and I quickly would abandon my outlines and all of that languaging because it wasn't congruent with my own experience. And if it wasn't matching up to my experience, how was it going to match up with anyone else's? And these ideas of, you know, the the pelvis being square. You know, that's not based on reality. Even when we compare gender differences, female pelvis, you know, is like this. A male pelvis is rectilinear for sure, but it doesn't, we still have the same axes of movement through the hips and the lumbosacral region and the like, and we need to respect our structure. And I don't want to ever feel bound up in an asana. And when I practice from the top down rather than from the bottom up.
From the pelvis up.
From the pelvis up, exactly. When instead I'm practicing asana, pulling myself around with my head, I usually don't enjoy the effects.
So interesting. I spent years in an Ashtanga room trying to square my pelvis in Vera 1 and not enjoying it. And really what that means pretty much is like, it means bringing the back pelvis forward. So why don't, before we close, we won't do it long, but why don't I jump into the pose and you can give us 2 or 3 ideas, or even your most important idea, because there's so much more coming in the course. We don't want to give away all your secrets, but tell us a couple of things that you really want to share. Maybe we'll cut off my head and you can just, or I'll trim.
Headless Lizzie.
What do you like to think about in this pose, Mary?
First of all, I like to think of the space between my feet from left to right. So I don't want to walk a tightrope.
Right.
I want us to respect our sacral width. So for most of us, that means we're not going to line up heel to arch or even heel to heel. We're going to line up a little bit wider from left to right.
Okay.
Because right away, then, you feel the difference, Lizzie, if you stand on the tightrope, if you stand heel to arch.
That's like this.
Yes. Now step that left foot to the left a bit. Just let it find its spot. So that's where I like to start, is with the width of base.
Let me scoot back a little. I do want you to see my face. Little more. Okay, good.
Okay. All right. So now, typically what we'll say bend the front knee. But instead, okay, so you bent the front knee. Instead of doing that, what I like to say is now press your pelvis down in the space between your legs.
So different.
So different. Now, just for kicks and giggles, press your pelvis down in the space between the legs and try to swing your left hip around to meet your right.
Wow.
Yeah, you feel it. It just doesn't make sense. And that's because it doesn't make sense, because you're now trying to leave your back leg behind.
Yes.
So now I want you to instead just let your pelvis find its spot. Let it sit in the space between the legs. There are 2 different actions happening. The front hip is in flexion, the back hip is an extension. So we want the pelvis to just sit in the middle.
Yeah, I like that so much better. And when I try to square my left hip, my back hip forward, I feel an immediate crunch on the right side of my lumbar spine.
Exactly. And that's not where we want to feel it, because if you let your pelvis find its spot, and then if you exhale and turn your rib cage so that your breastbone is facing forward.
Yes.
See, now we put rotation in the vertebral column where it likes it, and we've set up diagonal lines of resistance from the opposite hip to the opposite shoulder, and that's going to help with your sacroiliac.
Ooh. All right, Mary, we're going to leave it there because there's just so much that you could offer us, but we want this just to be a little taster teaser. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and tell everyone where we can find you on the internet.
You can find me at maryrichardsyoga.com, and on Facebook at A Little Yoga Goes a Long Way, and on Instagram at Yoga with Mary Richards.
Mary's brand new to Instagram, so hop over and follow her, give her some likes. I am at LizzieLasater.com on Instagram, on Facebook, and if you want to stay tuned to this type of course information from us for our back care webinar course, please visit www.experientialanatomy.yoga. That's the place to go. Big namaste, Mary.
Namaste, Lizzie.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.